Get your gun off me! Lower your gun! Get your gun off me!
It's reached.
Get your fucking gun off me, you asshole! Get the fuck off Wet'suwet'en territory! This is my sovereign land!
I'm filming a documentary for CBC television.
No problem. You're under arrest. You're under arrest.
For the record, I'm a member of the media. You've been notified that I'm here. I'm observing.
You're under arrest right now, so step out.
Okay.
I'm coming with you. I'm coming with you.
Camera down.
I'm a member of the media. I'm filming a documentary for CBC television. You are twisting my wrist. I'm a member of the media. I'm filming a documentary for CBC television. I have press credentials. Okay, would you like to see my press credentials?
So how are you two doing more than a week now after you were released from custody? What's the last week been like for you?
It's pretty disorienting to be released from jail in essentially your underwear, 5 hours from where the rest of your belongings are. So I spent several days just trying to reorient myself and just literally track down my belongings and had to dig one bag of my things out of a snowbank where it had been unceremoniously deposited by Coastal GasLink workers after they cleared Coyote Camp. So they scooped everything up with heavy machinery and dumped it into dump trucks and put it at the bottom of the mountain. So I was able to find my bag, but it's very muddy and very wet and pretty damaged. But anyways, here I am. I'm glad to be here. Feels good to be free.
Feels good to be out of jail and also to have all of my camera gear and all of my footage safe and sound and a lot of it published.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're both doing all right and that you're handling it so well. And I mean that sincerely because, you know, having been through it before, I'll admit now that I'm kind of free from the threat of further criminalization, I guess. It did take a toll on my mental health. And so with that, I would like to ask you both to kind of share your thoughts on the wider story and maybe begin by explaining why you've made such huge commitments as journalists and as a documentary filmmaker, Michael, to covering this story.
Well, I think this is a story of tremendous importance to all Canadians and also to the international community and, you know, the way that Canadians are viewed on the world stage. This is a story which cuts to the core of Canada's land rights and their rights in particular to a territory that's 22,000 square kilometers. You know, the Wet'suwet'en territory is an area the size of New Jersey. It's a massive piece of land that is being disputed. And so, you know, I think it's just incredibly important for Canadians to be educated on the basis for the struggle, not just, you know, the crisis points where we see tactical police deploying, where we see, you know, military responses or militarized responses rather to unarmed land offenders. You know, people need to know the context and the history and the actual issue that underlies it, which is the land issue. So to me, it's incredibly interesting to follow and focus on, you know, a conflict over so much land and, you know, beyond it, one that has implications for people throughout the country and Indigenous people throughout the country. You know, 95% of BC has a very similar status of being, you know, contested, unceded, non-treaty land. And, you know, I think that it's just, there's so much at stake here for both Canada and for the Wet'suwet'en.
Yeah, honestly, Michael said it really well, but that I would concur and just echo that we're in an era of, you know, national dialogue where we talk a lot about reconciliation. We talk a lot about UNDRIP, like the United Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And in British Columbia, we're nearing a 2-year anniversary where it was actually passed into law as DRIPA, you know, obligating the province to take that into serious consideration in their treatment of Indigenous people who live there. And so that's part of the national dialogue. And at the same time, you have this group of Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and the nation that has a very, very good claim and has been making their case since at least the 1970s for why their land is not really part of Canada or that it deserves a special distinction. And the government went ahead and permitted projects that they didn't consent to, and then all through the process has continued to enforce the construction of those projects at the point of the gun. And so that to me has major ramifications for Indigenous Canadian relations across Canada. So, I mean, this is something that is national importance to everybody. This should be, the Delgamuukw decision should really be a household term at this time. I also think that the image that we're talking about, where they are literally enforcing this unwanted by that nation anyways, pipeline at the point of a gun, is an inconvenient image for for both the government and the RCMP. I think when they want to talk about reconciliation with one breath and, turn around and point guns at Indigenous people, unarmed Indigenous people, to take them from their land, I mean, it's an obvious, hypocrisy.
Why is it important to both of you to be on the ground bearing witness and documenting what's happening in the Yinta, deep in the woods, often out of cell range or away from any connection to the outside world, and for such a sustained amount of time?
That's where the story is, and that's where the story has been playing out for years, is on the territory, often beyond police exclusion zones, where police have blocked access to reporters with mainstream media who have arrived, after a conflict has already begun on the territory. So, it's important to be there to witness the kinds of state interventions that are occurring on Wet'suwet'en territory. The way that I have observed things to be happening is that despite this question of land title, despite this unresolved and open question of, whether or not Canada has a claim to this land, there's been repeated armed interventions by militarized RCMP to assert ownership over Wet'suwet'en land at the barrel of a gun. And that is the story, and that is the story that's happening on the land.
I mean, and I've covered, all kinds of different issues in the city, hostage situations and various police responses to active shooters and things like that. And I have never seen as many tactical officers in my life, in my, over a decade of news coverage in various places, like I've seen it out there. You cannot be prepared for helicopters dropping green men from the sky. I mean, it is absolutely, it's insane. I just don't have any other words for it. It's not something that you should think should be happening in a reasonable society. And yet here it is, and it's happened multiple times over the last 3 years. So, I mean, I think that needs to be part of the conversation. Canadians need to know this is what their government's idea of reconciliation looks like. This is how they're engaging with Indigenous people on their own territories.
I think it's just worth addressing the focus on 2 white reporters who were removed from this, from being able to work and cover this, has really been an issue of national interest. It has been on the front page of newspapers. It's been a major story. Yet the removal of Wet'suwet'en people from their lands at gunpoint has not been given the same kind of attention. And I think we're becoming desensitized as a society, towards violence towards Indigenous people, or we are already as a baseline desensitized to that violence. And that's really important to interrogate and to challenge, because, this is not how a nation that is talking about reconciliation conducts itself. These actions are themselves important, and I hope that the focus shifts back where it belongs, on the actions of the police against unarmed Wet'suwet'en.